Perhaps the most scenic part of the Palos Verdes Peninsula is the Point Vincente Lighthouse. Today, we'll visit this iconic location on PCZ TV. PCZ TV. Point Vincente was named in 1790 by Captain George Vancouver on the 90-foot sloop Discovery. He named the point for his good friend Friar Vincente of the mission Buenaventura. Now, it wasn't the first lighthouse in the South Bay. That honor belongs to the Point Fermin Lighthouse in San Pedro, which was built in 1874. And Point Vincente is located just about 7 miles from that lighthouse. So why two lighthouses in such close proximity? Well, ships approaching from the north are unable to see the Point Fermin lighthouse as it's blocked by Point Vincente. This means that there's a stretch of some 62 miles or so to the north without an aid to navigation. The currents here are changeable, and heavy fogs occasionally prevail. Trust me, I'm often in the fog up here, both literally and figuratively. The planned opening of the Panama Canal in 1914 promised to dramatically increase the number of ships traveling along the coast of California. Oh, increased traffic. So typical of SoCal. There were about 10 shipwrecks in the area before Congress finally approved funding of a lighthouse in 1916. So yay, we have funding, but it wouldn't be that easy. You see, Frank A. Vanderlip purchased the Palos Verdes Peninsula in 1913, and he planned to construct an artisan's village atop Point Vincente. So he was like,
how about no?
The government's response?
Release the Kraken!
Unleash the lawyers. The USDA, under eminent domain, prepared a suit to condemn the parcel, and legal fighting continued from 1918 to 1921 when eventually the parties reached an agreement. Okay, so they started building right away. No. Not so easy again. Since after the initial budget allocation, the cost of material and labor had increased, and it further delayed the project. And the hurdles continued. This time it was the local government. Now, at the time, all building in Palos Verdes had to clear the city's art jury, which has been described in the paper as intense and arbitrary. But the Coast Guard submitted their design to the art jury, and after some wrangling back and forth, it resulted in a unique design for the lighthouse. It is America's only operating lighthouse with a Spanish and Mediterranean-style architecture. In addition, the landscaping was done by Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., who is also responsible for much of the Palos Verdes landscaping from the very inception of the city. Apparently, the liberal use of palm trees is unique to any lighthouse property. So, yay, we now have a lighthouse. The fog signal was activated in 1925, but the light atop of the 67-foot tall lighthouse itself was not turned on until the next year. The light utilized a 1,000-watt bulb with a third-order clamshell Fresnel lens. Barber Benald in Turin, I think I said that right, the oldest lens-making company in the world, manufactured the lens in Paris, France. Now, there's some disagreement as to whether the lens came secondhand from a lighthouse in Alaska or if it came directly from France. But either way, this lens weighs in the area of 1,200 pounds. Now, due to the tower's position on a high bluff, the actual height of the lens focal plane is 185 feet. An electric plant was installed at the station for furnishing power to the light and to the foghorn. And the electric motor rotated the giant light which emitted a beam equivalent to 1.1 million candles. Now, this lighthouse was, at the time, the brightest beacon in all of Southern California and could be seen for 20 miles out to sea. People-wise, the lighthouse service brought in its first keeper, George Lomadou, along with several assistants and their families. But alas, all was not smooth sailing. They all had trouble getting along. Charges that the keeper Lomadou used profane language, leaving the station without notifying the assistants, and allowed his dogs to chase the assistant keeper's cats, finally led to threats of physical violence. Now don't forget, Palos Verdes at this time was pretty much out in the boonies. So the lighthouse service investigated all the claims, and after the investigation, all 3 keepers were reprimanded. And Keeper Lomadou, well, he was transferred to the Piedras Blancas lighthouse, where apparently he got along fine with his assistants there. So who was to blame? Beats me. Now, I mentioned a generator on site, but it was for the light and the foghorn only. And finally, in 1933, they brought in electric power, but before that, all buildings were lit by kerosene lamps. A radio station was added in 1935, and 7 radio officers worked around the clock in shifts at the station. In 1939, the United States Lighthouse Service was merged with the U.S. Coast Guard. And then World War II happened. In 1941, the light in the Point Vincente lighthouse was extinguished due to the bombing of Pearl Harbor. There was fear that the light would serve as a beacon for enemy planes and ships. It would actually never be relit. The Point Vincente lighthouse, however, continued to operate during the war years. However, the 1,000-watt light was replaced by a tiny 25-watt bulb, and blackout curtains hung ready for use in all the windows in case of enemy attack. The rest of the peninsula went on a war footing, and a cannon battery was added to the hills overlooking the lighthouse. And then peace broke out. The lighthouse reverted to its 1,000-watt light, but the beam was so bright that locals complained it was blinding them in their homes and while they were driving their cars. So the landward side of the lantern room was painted an opaque pearly white. Now this led to another story about the lighthouse, a ghost story. You see, the opaque paint and the light created the illusion of a woman pacing the tower's walkway and gave rise to Point Vincente's Lady of the Light. Now some say the ghost was a spirit of a woman who leapt into the sea when her lover was lost in a shipwreck off the point, while others claimed she was the broken-hearted wife of a lighthouse keeper who had fallen to his death from the point's bluffs. Even another story has the Lady of the Light waiting for her husband, who was lost at sea, forever watching for his ship, and aided by the incredibly powerful beam's reach. But in 1955, a thicker coat of paint was added, which stopped the seepage of light, and the ghost has not been seen since. Well, that's a shocker. The lighthouse was manned until automated equipment and remote control took over in 1971. In 1979, Point Vincente Lighthouse was added to the National Registry of Historic Sites. Now, time for some fun facts. The light has been a popular filming location. Now, the placard at the Interpretive Center makes note of a visit by Lana Turner in 1941, and I'm guessing that's probably the first of the many celebrity visits. Of course, it was utilized by the TV series Sea Hunt, and see this video for more information on Sea Hunt and its local filming. And it's also been seen in episodes of The A-Team, Emergency, Fantasy Island, NCIS, and also, per the placard, Wonder Woman, and an Olivia Newton-John music video, just to name a few. Now, I won't play the music from Olivia Newton-John to avoid any YouTube strike, but There are some great images of the lighthouse and the lens, and I guess her singing. And hey, that's her at night. I wonder if she's Lady of the Lighthouse. Don't know. Put your thoughts in the comments below. Oh yeah, it's also been on the big screen with films such as 2001's Pearl Harbor or 2017 Dunkirk. So where are we today? The United States Coast Guard Auxiliary typically opens the lighthouse for tours on the second Saturday of each month. If you plan to go, make sure to check the appropriate website to ensure that they'll be open. The installation features the lighthouse, but also a small Coast Guard museum, which features historic navigational aids, lifeboats, etc. But the former Coast Guard residencies and the actual light tower itself remains off limits. There seem to be some conflicting reasons why tours don't include the lighthouse anymore, and these are:
Is it behind door number 1, or door number 2, or door number 3?
door number 1. The Daily Breeze reported that a public affairs officer advised that the tower needs renovations. Door number 2. Or that the facility isn't open to the public because it's currently operational. Door number 3. Or that all the buildings were coated with asbestos insulation. Which one is it? That beats me. But regardless, it is still a spectacular view.
But wait! There's more!
Oh, the Coast Guard also uses the property for rescue training. Of course, during the training, the grounds itself are closed for safety, but it is possible to watch from the nearby Point Vincente Interpretive Center. All of this makes you really appreciate the United States Coast Guard and their mission. And by the way, the auxiliary is open to civilians who want to volunteer to help out the United States Coast Guard mission. Information available here. Next door to the lighthouse is the Point Vincente Interpretive Center. Located on the old Army rifle range, there are great views of the lighthouse, as well as a small museum about the history of the peninsula. Everything from sea life to geology to early history, and, from 2019, housing the Fresnel lens that was originally in the lighthouse. There's a delightful video showing the removal and movement of the lens that's well worth your watch. Note that the lighthouse now uses all the current LED technology consistent with lighthouses across the country. It's a lovely area to picnic or walk or learn about the history of RPV. It does get crowded on weekends, so be advised that parking is limited. If you've been watching this far, I thank you. Bye!